a LitHub Radio podcast.
Hello, Memoir Nation. Well, if you haven't heard, Grant is teaching a flash memoir class this coming Tuesday, July 22nd on Zoom at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And there are a lot of reasons to check out this class. Number one, Grant is a fabulous and fun teacher who's passionate about the art of brevity in writing. Number two, the class is only $49 or free to paid members of Memoir Nation. And three, Flash is kind of a new thing, or maybe the new thing in memoir. If you're already into it or curious to find out more about it, please check out this class. There's no one better to teach it than Grant. You could be thinking about story, essay, or just a wisp of 100 words. No matter what, you won't want to miss this inspiring class. Sign up at memoirnation.com. Hope to see you there.
Hello, activists, comedians, memoirists, broadcasters, podcasters, filmmakers, executive producers, fathers, and sons. I'm Grant Faulkner, a wannabe comedian, a striving memoirist, and a podcaster, father, and son. And the reason I list all of these roles is that today we have a special treat. The amazing Kamau Bell is with us today, and Kamau is all of those things I just listed and much more. He's definitely one of those people who has been cloned several times because his bio is just dizzying in the number of things he does. And he covers so many subjects that cover the spectrum, you know, from the funny to the fraught to the frustrating. But he approaches everything with curiosity and humor and thoughtfulness. So I find him to be just so reassuring and comforting in the very challenging questions that he pursues in his art. And I'm here with my podcast co-host, Brooke Warner. And Brooke, Kamau is a genuine Bay Area celebrity as well, a genuine Berkeley celebrity where we both live. And as I just mentioned, I'm astounded by all that he's done. You know, just to list a few things for listeners who don't know him, after becoming a popular comedian, he hosted CNN's original series, United Shades of America, and he made the docuseries We Need to Talk About Cosby, and he wrote the memoir, The Awkward Thoughts of Kamau Bell, with a very long subtitle. And he's the reigning champion of Celebrity Jeopardy. And that's on top of doing comedy specials and writing books on activism and doing a bunch of other things. So he's obviously not just a comedian or not just any one thing. And so I'm curious, Brooke, do you have a favorite Kamau production or favorite Kamau experience of some sort?
You know, he is a Bay Area celebrity, you know, so I don't think you can live here and not hear about him or all the things that he's up to. I listened to the audiobook, The Awkward Thoughts of Kamau Bell, in preparation for this show. So I actually hadn't listened to it before, but that, you know, as he talks about today, it's a pretty old book. And I do, as much as I feel like I've known about Kamau for such a long time, I'm not sure that I knew about him like when that book came out. And so the memoir is actually wonderful, of course, and especially the audio because it's him. You know, he is reading his own book. You get a real flavor of who he is, his comedy, his politics. I subscribe to his Substack, which is amazing. One of my more favorite recent ones was explaining to his readers why California voters don't love, or sort of are okay with but don't trust Gavin Newsom, our current governor. And it's very hilarious, very worth reading because I was nodding along, you know, with someone who is like progressive but has sort of a lot of things problematic about him. I'll definitely drop the link in the show notes because it did make me laugh out loud. And then one of his work collaborators is Kate Schatz. You know, I know her loosely. We had her on the show. So I think that when their book came out, you know, the collaboration, Do the Work, an Anti-Racist Activity book, that got a lot of attention and was, again, he/they were on my radar. And it was, you know, a lot, of course, in the pandemic and in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, paying attention to anti-racism, which is such important work. And it's sad to me, though, Grant, it feels like eons ago and it was only 3 or 4 years, but we're in such a different era. But importantly, Kamau is out there fighting the good fight, you know, doing it through his comedy and humor, which I so appreciate.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say that I love how all of his projects express himself, you know, so it's like he's kind of writing his memoir in a bunch of different ways. And I think I first got to truly know him via his show, The United Shades of America, because he did really risky and dangerous things, like interview a member of the KKK, and he actually witnessed the burning of a cross, or the lighting of a cross, as they gently put it. And he also interviewed Richard Spencer, who is a different kind of racist than a Klansman because he doesn't hide behind a hood. He's like out there essentially preaching racism. And I recommend checking out that interview in particular if you haven't listened to it or watched it, because it's pure Kamau in the sense that somehow he keeps his cool in the face of some of the most racist statements you'll ever hear. And he even makes the interview funny, which seems impossible. Richard Spencer literally comes out and says that he's for more white privilege.
Oh my God.
And Kamau says, "Oh, that's working for you, is it?" Laughing. And Spencer goes on to list how white privilege gives the world better looking, better dressed people, better art, all sorts of ridiculous things. And Kamau just rolls with it and asks these great, thoughtful follow-up questions. And he somehow has a talent for making his interviewee, comfortable while totally exposing their heinous beliefs. And I've actually heard some people who've critiqued Kamau for giving a platform to racists like this, but Kamau says giving them a platform actually exposes them. And he likes having his ideas next to theirs and in contrast to theirs because he's confident his ideas are more convincing and just better. And I love this approach, and I love that show, which is unfortunately off the air because I think we need it now more than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Kamau certainly takes a lot of risks in his work and unearths a lot of different issues that I think all of his work is, in fact, a type of activism. And I'm close in age to Kamau, so certainly I know you too were moved by his documentary series, We Need to Talk About Cosby, which he directed. I think people know that The Cosby Show was a groundbreaking portrayal of a successful Black family in the 1980s. And Bill Cosby was even called America's dad back then. And I religiously watched that show on Thursday nights, as I'm sure many of our generation did. And it's an era that is easy to forget now. Just everything feels different. But in the documentary, Kamau talks about how he was a child of Bill Cosby, literally because Kamau grew up with asthma and stayed inside and watched a lot of TV. Including kids programs like Fat Albert and Picture Pages. And so his documentary explores that hero worship along with the complex legacy of Bill Cosby after the accusations of sexual assault that we all remember well. And in typical Kamau fashion, the documentary does not shy away from the difficult questions. And in fact, he confronts the uncomfortable truth that Cosby's artistic achievements and personal failings are probably inextricably linked. And I see it that way too. But Grant, the documentary features interviews with Cosby's accusers. Again, in the opposite way of what you were saying, importantly, providing a platform for those stories and experiences. It probes a lot of questions, and especially brings up this thing that you and I have talked about, actually. It's been a little while, but we have talked about how artists' actions cause harm and then how to deal with that fact, and it discussed artists like Michael Jackson and Woody Allen and Roman Polanski. But, more recent years, Harvey Weinstein, and very recently, Sean Diddy Combs. Sadly, this is just like an ever growing list of people.
Definitely, he poses interesting questions, and in our bonus materials, he actually, provides an interesting answer, his personal answer to Cosby. He's just fundamentally a truth teller, and I wish there were a genre or section in bookstores dedicated to truth tellers. The truth tellers who tell the difficult truths in particular. And I listened to several of his interviews in preparation for today's interview, and I found him just kind of mesmerizing. He's one of those people who I just like to hear think because he's such a reassuring and insightful thinker, but also a very challenging thinker. You kind of never know where the next sentence is going to go. And I especially think he's so good about talking about difficult subjects, both political and racial subjects, because he presents himself as a person with awkward thoughts, per the title of his memoir, and as one who isn't perfect but struggles and will continue to struggle. And I think he's curious above all, and you feel his curiosity in all that he does. For example, in the Cosby documentary, the reason I view that as part of his ongoing memoir in a different form is that you can feel him sorting out his own personal feelings about Cosby in the making of the film. And the documentary is a work that, just tries to answer a question, and you feel questions at the heart of everything Kamau does. So, Brooke, before we talk to Kamau, I thought we could each share a quote from his memoir and tell why we like it. And I was wondering if you wanted to go first.
Yeah. Well, one of the touching things about his memoir, of course, is that it's a lot about his backstory, and he writes about his parents, but notably his mother, Janet Cheatham Bell, who is a respected author, independent scholar, and publisher, and she's alive and she's out there and very popular in her own right. And I just love how he writes about her and the lessons that she taught him. And he writes about how he got his name basically because his parents were living in East Palo Alto in the 70s, and they were part of this very revolutionary crowd many of whom were taking on African names. And he said, which is funny. I mean, funny, not funny, that in that moment in time, he writes this, changing your name to an African or Arabic name was probably the equivalent of calling the FBI and saying, hello, could you please put me on a list, please? Thank you. And so Kamau was the first baby born to this tribe, he writes. And so he got a legal African name as a result. And Kamau is a Kenyan name, a common name that means quiet warrior. And he said that he thought this suited him very well. But, in line with just like educating authors, this is the quote that I want to share because it comes up a lot at She Writes Press. We have a house style about capitalizing Black as, the Black identity, because Black writers and intellectuals have made the case for this. And so when I was listening to the book, I appreciated that he took this on just because it's helpful for any writer. It's helpful for everyone to know, where people stand on this and then to act accordingly in your own writing. So he writes, by the way, I spell Black with a capital B because I subscribe to all the Black intellectuals and academics and barbershop sages who say that Blackness is as much an uppercase identity as Chineseness or Christianityness or any other proper noun identity is. And if Wikipedia is going to insist on capitalizing Klansmen, then I am certainly going to insist on capitalizing Black. So that was the one that I chose. Grant, how about you?
I love that you chose that. And I love his explanation because I once had to explain why we capitalize Black to a NaNoWriMo donor. And I could have used this quote to kind of back up what I was saying.
I'm saving it for my authors for sure.
Yeah, it's good for that. Well, the quote that I chose it because I see a lot of this in our current world. So Kamau says, when art sets racism in the past, no matter how good it is, it allows white people in the audience and others to say to themselves, wow, that racism sure was bad way back then. It's what happens when people go to see 12 Years a Slave. My response is always, yeah, you want to know another time when racism was bad? Earlier today, or now as well. And that just resonates with me because I think white people often think that racism is something that we've somehow remedied, and that it's mainly part of the past, or that it's a regional thing, like it's just in the South or mainly in the South and not a pervasive thing. And I grew up with a lot of people who are now MAGA people, and I'm connected with them on Facebook, which has definitely been very challenging these past 10 years. And I often think of one discussion where a childhood friend said the state of South Carolina should be able to fly the Confederate flag at their capital as a matter of free speech. And he very strenuously proclaimed that he wasn't a racist. But in thinking about it, I think he'd be so perfect for a conversation with Kamau because if there are 100 degrees of racism, then he might not be a racist on 10 of the 100. But then I don't think he truly recognizes or cares to recognize the other 90. And that's the reason why we need the DEI programs that are being cut and the conversations about race that people like Kamau are leading. And I'm not trying to be above it all or trying to separate myself from this conversation in any way, because I've done several different DEI trainings over the years. And I have to say they've been illuminating and enlightening and humbling. So I'm really upset that they're being taken away. And I definitely got a lot to learn, just like we all do. But that's the premise of these trainings, that we can all do better. But to do better, we've got to recognize our need to do better. And we shouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed about that need to do better. And that's what I think is so great about Kamau's approach. The conversation is part of the work, the struggle, and we've all got to engage in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I loved how he talks in the interview about, like, I'm going to force this conversation in a sense, but, in a way he's doing it like forcefully, but with a lot of clarity and, without fear. And that's how we're going to break through, and it just has to be this truism of one step forward, two steps back. And I hate that, but I'm in it for the long haul as well. And I am absolutely thrilled that Kamau is with us today, and we are going to get to hear from him after this very short break. Hello, listeners. If you've been listening the last few weeks, you know that Memoir Nation is live. We have officially kicked off the site where you can go and sign up to be a member for just $99. Please just go look at the website too, because we have a free level and we definitely want everyone who wants to come in at that level as well. Out the gate, the $99 membership, though, gives you a lot of perks, including a weekly newsletter with lots of memoir insights, tips, advice, and encouragement. You also get bonus podcast content and a coach code for a future free class. And at the next level, we also have a few extra goodies, which include being part of our accountability group and all of the classes we have on offer. So don't discount that one for sure. And if you've been a longtime listener, we just want to say thank you, but also to say that we're going to be accessible and doing lots of community stuff over at Memoir Nation, and we want you to be a part of it. We'll make it worth your while to come hang out. So we thank you in advance for supporting us to create the space that we've been dreaming of for writers like you, for writers like us. Visit memoirnation.com to see more. And thanks.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, I'm super excited to introduce W. Kamau Bell, who is many, many, many things. So it's unlikely I'm going to do his bio justice. But here are some highlights that we didn't mention at the top of the show. Kamau is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning host, filmmaker, and comedian, best known for the CNN docuseries United Shades of America, for which he won multiple Emmys. And he's returning to the stand-up stage after 5 years with a brand new comedy tour, Who's With Me? And that kicked off February 13th at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And it's continuing now through the fall 2025 with stops in Portland, Charleston, Durham, Oklahoma City, and more. So get your tickets and check out the tour schedule at wkamaubell.com. And Kamau is also the current champion of ABC's Celebrity Jeopardy, and he played and won $1 million for Donors Choose, which helps provide funding and resources to public schools nationwide. Welcome, Kamau.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Kamau, I'm going to start by asking kind of a weird question about a line in your bio. A few years ago, or in a past bio, I noticed the line was, he cares a lot, maybe too much. And now it's he cares deeply and sleeps little. It's just a slight difference, but I was wondering if you can tell us more about why you've included that you care a lot in your bio, because I actually think that's like obviously a through line to your work, whether it's your comedy or your anti-racist workbook or United Shades of America.
Yeah, I mean, so let's break the fourth wall. I think I write all my bios. So people ask for bios, and not that I don't have help. Sometimes I have somebody go over them just to make sure. But like at the end of the day, I sort of go back in and put the final touch on them. And so, yeah, I think when I wrote, I think it was just very clear to me, like how earnest sounding my bio is. And I was just like, I just wanted to own it. Like, it just sounds like this guy really seems to care a lot. And I just was like, no, I do. And then I think the other thing, so the newest version was like, I'm still a comedian. Make it a little bit funny. Don't just be like, So I think that he cares a lot, maybe too much. That was good. And then I realized that I was more focused on the little bit of sleep I was getting more than anything.
Well, as an insomniac, I sympathize.
I think mine is due to being a parent of three daughters. Yeah.
Well, Kamau, since we're a podcast that's about writing memoirs, I did want to ask you about yours, which has perhaps the most hard to remember title in the history of memoirs. I
went to the Fiona Apple School of Titling. I always want to make that clear.
It's excellent. It is The Awkward Thoughts of W. Kamau Bell, Tales of a 6'4", African-American, heterosexual, cisgender, left-leaning, asthmatic, Black and proud, blurred mama's boy, dad, and stand-up comedian. Awesome. So tell us more about this subtitle and just in general, if you don't mind, spending a little bit of time on the memoir for the memoir audience and writing it and what it meant to you.
Well, it's interesting you ask about it because I've been thinking about it a lot because so I had that thing happen a couple years ago where the publisher reached out to me and goes, we have X amount of copies of your hardcover left that we're going to get rid of. We will either shred them or we can sell them to you for, I think it was like $1 each. And I was like, please, I will take them off your hands. It seems like bad juju for you to shred my memoir. So now they exist, I think, in our garage, much to my wife's dismay, just because I can't let them be shredded. Whatever I think about that book, and I have lots of complicated thoughts about it, I can't let them just be shredded. And which means we sort of I end up giving them to bookstores. I'll sign a bunch and give them to local bookstores. And sometimes I'll sell them at events just as a way to sort of not make sure they don't just disappear off into the garbage pile. And then recently I found my memoir was back ordered on a couple of sites, on Amazon. It says there's one copy left. And I'm like, one copy left, the paperback version of it. And then on bookshop.org, it was this is back ordered. And I was like, why is my book back ordered? I'm still around. I haven't become irrelevant. I'm still doing things. I'm still, I just won Celebrity Jeopardy. And so I reached out to the publisher and there's this weird sort of I don't know, thing in publishing where, because I'm not the most famous person in the world, they just don't print a lot of copies of it. And it's really sort of become this thing where I was like, this book really does feel like baby pictures to me. Like when I look at it and people quote it back to me, I'm like, yeah. And also I remember writing it I was really busy at the time, which is no news for me. And so I wrote it quicker than I imagined I would have written a book about myself when somebody said, sit down and write your memoirs. And earlier, because I was still like in the middle of everything. So I didn't really think I was memoir ready. And so I think about it as baby pictures, but then people quote it back to me and say things that are important to me about it. And so now I'm like on a mission to like save my memoir. I got to figure out how to what that means, what that looks like. I don't know yet, but I just feel like
stop for Amazon in your garage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, come to my garage and I'll sell you a copy. So, but yeah, so I've been thinking about it a lot, and I mean, I was in my I don't know what is that? I was in my how old was I when I wrote that thing? I mean, but I was definitely not like had just the CNN show had only aired its first season. And at that point, you don't know what's going to happen next. So to imagine that, like, if I had waited a few years, I would have had so much more to talk about. And I would have learned so much more in the period of time that I was on that CNN show. I'm not going to say I'm the kind of person who needs to write multiple memoirs like I'm Maya Angelou or somebody, but I do feel like the last 7 years is a lot more to tell to that story than there was that first, 30-something years. So
yeah, I was going to say perfect timing for the next memoir.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not selling enough copies. Maybe nobody wants it. And at the time I wrote it, I told myself I will never write another book again because it was so hard. And I found myself now, like, I wrote a book about an anti-racism activity book with my friend Kate during the pandemic. And I'm in the new Michael Lewis book about a chapter in the new Michael Lewis book. So despite my best efforts, I'm still in the book world.
We could structure the interview just going through each word in this of the adjectives in your subtitle.
That's true. Oh yeah, about the title. You asked about the title, so I'm sorry. That's right. Let me turn that back to. That's where my brain runs all over the place. I'm an only child. So yeah, I think that I'm a big believer that titles need to tell people what's going on in the thing, and sometimes it can be one word, and sometimes it will take a lot of words. And so for me, I felt like I don't want people to go, "Oh, it's a Black comedian who wrote a book." Full stop. Mm-hmm. Like, because I think that there's comedians write books, I'm putting in quotes all the time, and it's just a collection of their jokes, So I really wanted to make sure that, like, I want you to read the title and figure out and have a sense of what this is. And if it's not for you, then keep moving. I'm not trying to trick you into a book, but I think sometimes titles can be super succinct. I think United Shades of America was a great title. I didn't come up with that title, but it really gets you a sense of what the show's going to do. I think the show lives up to the title. My documentary I did about Bill Cosby was We Need to Talk About Cosby. Again, I didn't come up with that title, but I thought that works. Mm-hmm. So I really do believe in titles. And with my new comedy tour, which came out of my Substack, who's with me? That's all I need to know. If you're with me, we can figure the rest out from there. So that really started with my Substack and just sort of lent itself to the comedy tour about, like, that's all I'm trying to ask right now is who's with me. We can figure everything else out later. So yeah, that book, even things like knowing that there are words in there some people wouldn't understand, like cisgender was fairly new on the mainstream scene at the time, and so a lot of people didn't know what that was. But then a lot of people didn't know what blurred was. I remember having a conversation with my publisher about, like, do you need Black and African American? I was like, you absolutely need Black and African American. They mean two different things. So there was definitely longer versions. There was more things. If I could go back in, I might change some things. Like Roxanne Gay asked me when I was on my first book tour in LA, how come you didn't put husband? And I was like, that's a good question, Roxanne Gay. I still am a husband, but it's still a good question.
Well, I'm just going to choose one more segment of the subtitle to talk about. I saw you at an event with your mother, and I was just touched by the way you two interacted. And I also like your quote, everything I've learned on how to be a man, I learned from a woman, because I feel pretty much the same way. Men when I think about it, haven't given me a lot of great guidance in life, but women have. So I was wondering if you could tell us about being a mama's boy. Yeah,
so I was an only child, or am an only child still to this day. And I don't know if it works this way for all only children, but I'm an only child. I think being an only child and growing up with a single parent household means that it's be great to form a bond with that person, the only other person in the house. Like, it'd be great to, like, be really close to them. I would imagine that's not always the case, but it was certainly the case with me that me and my mom were super close. She was one of my best friends when I was a kid. I would have told you that. Who's your best friend? My mom. I would not understanding what that sounded like. We were super close. We also were super comfortable not being on top of each other all day, every day. So, like, she would be like at her desk in her office in the house doing whatever, and I'd be on the TV watching and drawing. So we didn't need to be in each other's space all the time, which really gave me a lot of independence and really encouraged me to have independent thought. And then I was around my dad in the summertime, but our relationship was not that intimate. And so I wasn't able to ask him the questions that I thought I'd see on TV, like the Brady Bunch. The dad sits the sons down and talks about man things or whatever. And I did not have that kind of relationship with my dad. Still don't really. But like with my mom, I learned a lot about being a man based on what my mom said about the men in her life and my dad. And my mom teach me the kind of man she wanted me to be, whether she knew it or not.
Hmm. I love that so much. Yeah, it's very touching, even how you write about your mom in your memoir as well. And I saw your recent Mother's Day post on Instagram. So there's a lot of good stuff out there online for people to look at. I wanted to ask you about being a comedian. We recently had Jeff Hiller on the show, and he's a stand-up comedian, but he had just finished his first memoir, and he was talking about how being a comedian gives him such attention to detail with his language and attention to rhythm and cadence where the jokes are concerned, and that helped with the memoir. And so we were wondering if you find that being a comedian affects your writing. I mean, I'm assuming it does, but maybe specifically around personal writing. And then just noticing the long list of things you do in your bio. You also didn't mention that you're a writer. So I'm going to join on with Roxane Gay here and be like, we could just go and go and go.
Yeah, I don't think at the time I really would have thought of myself as a writer. Not that I wasn't, but I wasn't like writing. Like now I would definitely say this guy has become a writer. Like, because at the time on United Shades, I wasn't even really allowed to write that show that much. By the end, I was writing a lot of it or rewriting a lot of it. So I think that even though in reality TV show, nobody's writing, and I'm doing the scare quotes again, and nobody gets credit for writing. I was doing a lot of writing. And then when I started directing, you have to do a lot of writing when you direct. And so I certainly see myself as a writer now, but I would say much like your friend Jeff, the core of what I am is a stand-up comedian. So everything I'm doing is through the operating system, as Mark Maron puts it, or the drive shaft of being a stand-up comedian. That's how Mark puts it. And so that's what sort of like drives all my creative decisions. Even if I'm directing a documentary about a man who committed a bunch of crimes like I have, I'm still looking at like, how do we get to the point? What do we need to do? Is there something can we edit this down? Oh, we actually need this thing that seems like a detour because it helps you understand. So yeah, it helps you understand the point we're trying to make. So I think good stand-up comedians are editors because you have to edit down the thing to get to the punchline. And now everybody does it differently. Like somebody like Mitch Hedberg, there's no fat on the jokes at all. It's just like, these are the essential words I need. But Lewis Black, there's a lot of fat because he sort of wants you to enjoy sort of the all the stuff around it, And then you get to somebody like George Carlin, which is, again, it's these huge pieces, but they're super precise. And so I think and I think about like Billy Connolly, who is a British comedian, who like, seems like these dog tails where they're not really going anywhere, but he always knows where he's headed to. So I think everybody does it differently, but we all have an internal metric of like, how do I want to get there? So when you sit down to write, you could think that you're just like, oh, I get to relax a little bit, which is true, but you still want to make sure you're getting to whatever the point is. It helps the writing not become so aimless, I think. I think it helps the writing not become so navel-gazy and journal entry-y so you keep in mind that there's a point I'm trying to get to, and I may wander while I get there, but I still need to get there.
Well, Kamau, I love how you talked about how comedy is the lens that you approach everything with. And now you're on your first tour in 5 years, the Who's With Me tour. And you talked a little bit earlier about Who's With Me, but I was wondering if you can go a little bit deeper into that and what it means in terms of the overall show. And also just what's making you laugh these days, if anything, and what role does comedy have in our current state of affairs?
I think, again, Who's With Me is sort of like, I jokingly say it's like the inverse of Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us. Like, like he was saying, those people are not with us. I'm saying, who is with me? I'm sort of inviting people in. And I think that the title is important. I think so much like on the memoir, I was basically going, are you with this person? Is this the kind of person you want to spend a couple hundred pages with? If not, no big deal. I think I'm always in the standpoint of like, if you're not with me, it's fine. I just want to make sure you know who I am, so that you can not show up if you don't want to be here, So I think the idea being that, like, over the course of, the last 10 years or so, I've really made a big effort to educate myself and to educate myself in front of people. A lot of United Shades is me getting smarter while you're getting smarter, maybe. Like, you'll hear me go, oh, I didn't know that, or that I never heard that before. And not being worried about the viewer thinking that I'm stupid, because it's about being educated in front of people. And then understanding that, like, in this political moment we're in, it's important to find alliances and allies and a cohort and co-conspirators, whatever words you want to put on them. And they may not all look like you, sound like you, even believe the same things you believe, but we know that we want to stand on the correct side of history. So for me, it's really important in the show, and early in the show, I do a whole thing about, like, these are a bunch of lessons I want you to take from the show, whether or not they're funny or not. This is just important stuff for you to know. And some of them are funny, but it really is a way for me to go, here's all the things I'm down with. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to hear me make some bold political statements. You're going to hear me make some silly statements. You're going to hear me make some statements that are maybe you don't understand right away. But it's really a way to go, this is the line I'm on. And if you're on this line, then come on this side. And if not, that's fine. Like, it's, again, I'm not running for office. So, and it's been great to be out there because my fans, or the people who enjoy what I do, understand that, like, they understand what they're getting into. Even if they've never seen me do stand-up before, they know we are here as it's part gathering and bringing the people together, and also powering our social batteries. A lot of things. The thing I hear from people the most on this tour specifically, which I haven't heard on previous tours, is I didn't know I really needed that. Mm-hmm. Like, I needed an evening to laugh, and I need an evening to laugh about the things that I find are the most scary. So I feel like one of my jobs is to, like, that big news story that we're all worried about. Here's some things. Here's the ways I see it that I think are funny. I'm not making light of it. I'm making fun of it. Like, I'm not ignoring the gravity of it. I'm just sort of, like, figuring out how can we pull this apart. And I don't really find it hard to laugh. I think most comedians don't find it hard to laugh, or most humans maybe don't. You just don't catalog all your laughter all day the way comedians do. Like, you don't go, like, if I laugh, I go, huh, is that anything? Nah, it's good. Or, huh, I need to write that down. A lot of it happens around my kids. Like, my kids know what the state of the world is, but they also, want to eat ice cream all day long. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's not really a sense of, like, trying to find the humor. I think a lot of times people put political comedians, or even someone like myself, as if I'm sitting around all day being like, how do I find the jokes? When in reality, the jokes find you. Like, I will listen to the news first thing in the morning, and I'll just start laughing at something NPR says, and I'll be like, that they did not mean to be a joke. And I'm just like, wow, that is, and sometimes it's just a laughter of shock. Like, wow, that's crazy that happened, or that politician said that thing. And then your brain starts to wander and starts to go, that's crazy, because if that said that, then this means that. And if that means that, and then suddenly you're building a joke without even thinking about it. Like, if he said that, what if he said that? And then you sort of, like, it's like the Rube Goldberg machine of jokes that just sort of starts building itself on your own in your head. And then not all of them end up that way, but then if you keep sort of working on it, you realize, oh, there must be something here. Let me figure this out.
Well, you mentioned somewhere, and I can't remember where this was, but you were sticking up for comedy and calling it, this is an art form, mm-hmm. It deserves to be reckoned with. And I oftentimes turn to comedy for comedians say something that I'm maybe thinking but not saying, or they're mm-hmm. saying it for me, and they're pushing boundaries that maybe I'm too scared or too hesitant to push.
No, you just don't have the job description. You can't do it if you're like, not everybody has that job description.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, I wish you would run for public office. Kamau. We need more people. No, my dad won't let me. Not that I would want to, but my dad is actually more like a guy who seems like he could have run for office, and he's just like, don't ever get in. Like, he basically feels like you're always more powerful on the outside than you're on the inside of those things. So, interesting. Well,
but yeah, I would have because I was talking to somebody before this, like, talking about the mayoral race in New York, and they're like, can Zorhan Mamdani do it? I'm not trying to get into the politics of it. I'm not a New Yorker, but I was like, look, he may be the savior New York needs. One of my friends is good friends with him. But I've said this for years, mayor of New York is the worst job in the world. Like, it is the worst. So I don't know. So, you can be the person who has all the good ideas, but then you got to deal with the the person who's worked in the permit office for 45 years and has no interest in your in your free bus system. I don't, so I'm just making these things up. But
for sure. Well, Kamau, here's our last question. It's about how you tackle racism in challenging ways, whether through your interviews with the Klan on the United States of America or the New York Times bestseller you wrote with Kate Schatz, which is called Do the Work, an Anti-Racist Activity Book. And we had Kate on the show a few years ago, and I definitely admire her work. And I've heard you say that too few people realize the legacy of racism that drives Trump. And I'm wondering if you could tell us more about your approach to fighting racism, why you wrote the Anti-Racist Workbook, and then especially in this current era where DEI programs are being cut, like, have you found that there's interest in having discussions around the activity book, or do you feel like it's kind of gone underground?
I mean, so first of all, I would say this. I don't actually care if there's interest because we need to have the conversation. And one of my jobs is to be the, I forget what they call that thing when you see like cops knock a door through with the big giant thing, like the,
Yeah.
I'm that for racist conversation about racism. I'm going to knock the door open. I'm going to try to knock the door open, whether you want to have the conversation or not. Now, jokes do help people get more prepared to have the conversation. So when we wrote the Anti-Racist Activity book, the whole point was like a lot of times these books seem so serious that they maybe are off-putting, or just books about racism in general, that we wanted to, as I think it's Audrey Cade Bombara says, make the revolution irresistible. So I think part of it is you have to be funny to get people to sort of engage. Mm-hmm. But if we're not going to have this conversation now in this country about America's history of racism, then we're getting to the point where we will never have it in this country, which then means we're not the country we claim to be. And we're just going down a different path, which has happened throughout. And, I know Americans like to think we've been here since the dawn of time, but it's like, but countries shifting their brand has happened many times throughout history where, oh, they used to be that, and now they're this. Oh, they used to be. And if you don't understand, just Google Venezuela. So I'm very clear that like, if we don't actually have it this time, if those of us who want to be on the correct side of history don't force that conversation this time, then it's just never going to happen. And those of us who can will pick up and go somewhere else, to other places around the globe, which is, again, that has happened since the dawn of time. Man, Rome's not really what Rome used to be. Let's go somewhere else. So I think let's be clear about that. And those who can't are just going to have to deal with what America becomes and reveals itself to be. So, I think my job is to like, one, be clear about the moment and share information and try to inspire people to action through humor, but also sometimes just call your congressperson, just do it. I'm not going to be funny about it, just call your congressperson. And then two is to like make the art that I can to sort of support all that. And then everything else is like, try to be with my family and get some sleep, like I just, so I'm very clear where I am. When Trump won the second time, it became like, the first time he won, we had this moment of like, oh no, many of us, this is so sad. But we sort of thought, well, we just got to get through this 4-year period and then it'll be fine. Well, now it's like, this might never change. We may like, this could be literally the rest of this country's history could be sort of Trumpified, and I'm very clear on that. So I'm gonna do what I can to not make that happen. And y'all are lucky. I got 3 young kids who don't want to move out of the country, because otherwise I'd be doing it from New Zealand, but they won't let me do that.
Well, thanks for your work, Kamau. We appreciate you.
Well, like I said, thank my kids for demanding that I live in Oakland.
Big thanks, Kamau. This is a treat.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with today's Book Alley.
Well, Grant, this is still a brand new segment, Book Alley, and I will say Clara Wolf is not yet getting that many emails, and so I do want to put out notice to listeners that if you have a book that you would like to have featured on Book Alley, you can email our assistant, Clara at memoirnation.com, and, I think it's going to take a minute for people to feel like, oh, okay, I can be featured on Memoir Nation, and we're excited about it. So please do. So Grant, while we're waiting for people to take advantage of this opportunity, I want to share another opportunity with listeners. And that is that She Writes Press has our annual contest going on. It's called STEP, which stands for She Writes Press Toward Equality in Publishing. Submissions are open right now, all the way through the end of August. It is open to authors who self-identify as female and for writers who self-identify as a writer of color. The specifics of that, sort of a complicated identity mosaic, is listed on our site, shewritespress.com/equality-in-publishing. We'll put it in the show notes as well, but I want to make sure that people who are qualified and want to do this consider submitting.
Yeah, it's such a great contest, Brooke. And you guys, you award 2 publishing contracts every year. So that's pretty significant. You've been doing it since 2018. So, wow, 7 years, almost as long as we've been doing the podcast. And I remember a long time ago, we had Bobby Gentry Goodwin on the show to tell us about her book, Revelation, and her experience of the STEP contest. And she was your first winner. Is that right?
Yeah, she did kick it all off for us. And since then, we've published a lot of books. I'm going to read them, actually. This is part of our shout out for Book Alley. It's interesting, though. I counted. We had 8 novels, or so far, we have 8 novels, 2 memoirs, and 1 anthology. And I hadn't actually realized how weighted we've been toward fiction. But here they are. And you can find them on that landing page I mentioned, or just Google She Writes Press STEP Contest, which is a little easier than me saying the URL again. But the novels are The Goddess Twins by Yodasa Williams, Malcolm and Me by Robin Farmer, Love in the Age of Dragons by Fatima Henson, Winter of My Spring by Fartumo Caso, Far Away From Here by Ambata Kazi, All Our Wars by Stephanie Vasquez, Garden of Second Chances by Mona Alvarado Frazier, and Purple Lotus by Veena Rao. And then our 2 memoirs are The Fortune Teller's Prophecy by Lali Pia, Kinda Korean by Joan Sung, and then finally our awesome anthology edited by my friend Liz Hines, which is called Aftermath: Life in Post-Roe America.
Yeah, it's such a great list, Brooke, and there's a lot of good work being put into the world, and I'm so glad that you're keeping this contest going. And actually know Lally and love her. She was a contestant when we shot the proof of concept for the show, America's Next Great Author, that I've been working on. So listeners, I want to encourage you to write this URL down and share with a friend. So again, please listen up. Here it is. shewritespress.com/equality-in-publishing. And we need all kinds of voices to be elevated. And I think right now, in the face of the pushback we're seeing against DEI that I just talked about, and also some inexcusable, flat-out racist and nativist policies we're witnessing, books play the role they've always played. They raise awareness, they speak to experience, they speak truth to power. That's their wonderfulness and their power in the world. And this is also at the heart of Kamau's work. So if you don't already know his work, check him out. Sign up for his great Substack, which is called Who's With Me? Same title as his comedy tour. And when the STEP winners get announced in October, we'll make sure to give those writers a shout out. And I'm excited to see who the winners will be, Brooke.
Thank you. Me too. And listeners, thank you for the time that you spend with us on this podcast. We do hear from a lot of you that you listen on your walks, while you are doing chores, before you write, while you're driving. We're super honored that we're in your company in all of those ways. And thank you for all that you've done to make our transition to Memoir Nation a success, including a lot of you signing up for Memoir Nation and for our Substack. And if you have a minute to give us a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to, that would be a great summer gift to us. We do live in a competitive world, and simple reviews do support us to get more listeners and therefore more advertisers, which is something that we are actively working on doing so that we can keep this show free, which of course is our intention for forever. But seriously, a review, we know it takes time, so it's a big ask. Time, not money, though, will help us get there. So thank you. We appreciate you, and we will be back in your feed next week.